we knew it was. We knew at that point it wasn't life-threatening. No, let me rephrase that because it's too blasé. We knew at that point we weren't likely to die. We knew it was a life-threatening situation because the water temperature was cold. We didn't know if there's any ships in the area, and I didn't want the helicopter to leave Stornoway to come and get us because the Sikorsky didn't have that flight range. I'm fully aware of that. But in conversations with Stornoway Coast Guard, they said that the helicopter had just come back from a mountain rescue. They were putting it into service. They were going to overhaul the main gearbox because the Sikorsky had to have frequent gearbox overhauls, and they were putting the long-range tanks on. I said, "Are you absolutely sure it can do it?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "Okay." The next thing was the big, I think it's a C-130 or something, flew over and dropped some marker buoys, and the other crew went, "Oh, great, we're going to be saved." I said, "The aeroplane can't do anything. All it can do is actually take photographs for the inquest and do its best and drop the marker buoys for whoever's coming next," which is you just have to accept.
Report back that they've seen you.
Yeah, they've taken photographs of us. They saw the mess it was in, and we just had to wait. And eventually, we heard the helicopter after about 4, 5, 6 hours, and it flew straight past us. The mist had come down. The seas were quite big at that time, and the current had got hold of the marker buoy, so it passed us. And I knew it had to be on the end of its flight range. I didn't know how the hell it was going to recover. And so we telephoned Stornoway. They turned it round. It was a low-level arrival, so we couldn't put a flare up. They didn't. Once they saw us, there was no point putting smoke flares up or whatever. And we weren't prepared to fire a flare into the mist in case it hit the helicopter. So you have to think of all these things as your lights flashing past you. And they did do a particularly low-level pickup. Very, very low, to the point we had 2 men in a harness. I'm going to say maybe 4 metre pickup, not long. Then Egbert went up, and I was the last person in, and all we had was one grab bag with a few bits and pieces in. And as it elevated, someone in my earphone said, "Tell your guys to hold on." I said, "Why?" They said, "We're nearly out of fuel." I said, "What did you pick us up for then?" And out the mist, the RFA Fort George came, and they virtually landed the helicopter on the back of the Fort George. Very, very, very low fuel, very, very low fuel. And the captain of the ship had a meltdown. He said he should have dropped it in the sea, because if the helicopter crashed on the Fort George, then there's lots and lots and lots and lots of problems. But and then we were taken to Stornoway, where we were taken care of by the Fisherman's Mission, which we still support to this day.
That is an amazing story, sir. That is an amazing story to hear.
It is, but just to quickly finish it, it's the only time in my life I've had absolutely nothing to my name. Because when they opened our hotel for us, it was the early hours of the morning, and they just took all our clothes off us. We had already had to abandon our shoes, we were barefoot. And I was sat in the room thinking, I've got nothing. Nothing. No money, no cards, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then early in the morning, there's a knock on the door, your clothes are all dried for you, and and then you start to pick life up again. But, you go, well, that was close. That was close.
What jumped out at me there is you were not wanting to be rescued. You were trying to discourage them from sending the helicopter. What was your plan otherwise then?
We didn't have one, but I didn't want anybody else to put their life in danger. We were where we were out of choice. I just generally, at the time, and still believe that it's wrong to put other people's lives in danger if you're not actually going to die yourself. For argument, yes, we would have been cold, yes, we would have been wet and miserable, but tomorrow was another day. And, the conditions weren't particularly kind. So could we have waited for the Fort George? Yes, we probably could have done. Could we have waited for a fishing boat? Could we have waited 24 hours, 36, 48 hours? Yes, we probably could have done. It wouldn't have been nice. It would have been very miserable. But it would have been wrong to put other people's lives in jeopardy.
I respect to you for that. Yeah. That's amazing. And
it was our choice
for explaining.
Yeah, it's our choice to be adventurers. And the rescue services, it's their choice to do what they want to do. But if I had my say, I wouldn't have asked for the helicopter. Incidentally, on that, and it's still on the Coast Guard website, it was actually classed as a rescue. It wasn't classed as a rescue. it was classed as an exercise where I did everything right, they did everything right, and the Navy did everything right. It was actually classed as an exercise, and it was a 5-star exercise.
Oh,
So it tested them as well, but it's something we could have done without.